Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ma'am Zarate. I am Chuvian Antipala. I'll be doing a vlog containing the language, its history, how it began, its process until the modern English. So language is a road map of the culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they are going. It's by Rita Mae Brown. Indeed, it's like you're traveling around the world to meet and discover its origins and the timeline of how, when, and where it started. We will be meeting and knowing its whereabouts before we go and travel with let's know the language itself. So language is as a system is the rules and the patterns that relate words. The most important word in the definitions of language is the word system. A language is the rules or patterns that relate words to one another. There are 6 grammatical signals of language: parts of speech, affixes, concord, word order, function words, and prosodic signals. Language as science has its morpheme, the smallest linguistic sign, a meaningful form that cannot be divided into smaller meaningful parts. In English, signs are what the system organizes. A sign stands for something else. For example, the word apple stands for the fruit that we only knew. Language organizes signs to represent other things. The smallest linguistic sign is a morpheme, which is a sequence of sound with a recognizable meaning. Morphemes can either be free or bound. Language as vocal. Language is a system that can be expressed in many ways, in writing, by hand signals, or in gestures and etc. However, the signs of language are basically vocal and or oral, being sounds produced by the mouth or received by the ear. Gestures is another form of expressing speech. Language is as conventional because it can be represented in many different ways. There is actually usually no connection between the sounds we make and the phenomenon of the life. Language change and its variation, its historical or diachronic variation is matched by contemporary or synchronic variation. The latter is of the two kinds, dialects and registers. On the other side, in language as a means of human communication, I learned how language can be analyzed as a means of communication. I also learned that language systems are open. I learned that language is a system of rules and patterns that relate words to one another. The language system organizes signs to represent, and other things it can be expressed in the form of speech, writing, and gestures and theories of origin language. There are so many theories like the bow wow theory, the ding dong theory, the popo theory, the gesture theory, and the yo he ho theory, and many more. Characteristics are the features of language. There are 10 main characteristics for language, and that is language is systematic. It is a system of communication that relies on verbal or nonverbal codes to transfer information. Language is a system of which is symbolic. It is a symbolic system of communication based on a complex system of rules relating to spoken, signed, or written symbols. Language is social arbitrary, cultural, dynamic, variation, meaningful, and human. Language is an element of communication, which means the transmission of ideas and feelings so that the sender and the receiver share the same understanding. There are tips of active listening, so you should listen. Pay attention. Show that you are listening. Provide feedback. Defer judgment and respond appropriately. And for the unit 2, now it's time to travel and discover the timeline of language. The prehistorical status of the English language. English belongs to the Germanic language or the Germanic branch of the Indo-European languages. This group began as the common language in the Elbe River region about 3,000 years ago. Around the 2nd century BC, this common Germanic language split into 3 distinct subgroups: East Germanic was spoken by the peoples who migrated back to southeastern Europe. The three subgroups of the common Germanic language are East, North, and West. The Old English period, or 700 to 1100, the beginning of the Old English period, is marked by the oldest manuscripts written with the Roman letters found in Britain, dated by 780. Prior to this date, the Jutes and the Angles and Saxons have been Christianized, which meant that they adopted the Roman alphabet and started to produce and comprehensive primarily Christian literature in English. Old English was a highly synthetic language. That is, the inflectional endings were used to signal and grammatical function of the words, and word order was not considered as important. The other languages that influenced Old English were Celtic, Latin, and Scandinavian. Vikings and their influence on the English. The first Vikings attacks in England started around 800 AD, and they were first merely plundering raids, but some 50 years later, these attacks had become more serious, and groups have even started occurring in Britain. The resistance from the English was badly organized and often ineffective. The lack of unity in England made it a great deal easier for the Vikings to roam and raid the countryside. And for the Middle English period begins the Norman conquest at the Battle of the Hastings in 1066, when the Duke of the Normandy, William the Conqueror, defeated King Harold and became the King of England. The Norman invasion of England in 1066 brought French into England. The vast majority of the borrowed words belong to the spheres of the court, administration, law, the army, church, art, literature, medicine, and sciences. The grammatical changes in Middle English were the loss of inflection, loss of grammatical gender, loss of case system, less freedom in word order, and greater use of prepositions in modern English. The great vowel shift was changed in pronunciation began around 1400. It was a process which led to long vowel sounds being raised and diphthongs. The printing press brought standardization to the modern English people, came in contact with the languages around the world, and borrowed from them especially words denoting objects and phenomena that they themselves lack words for. And for the unitary conservatism and the innovation in American English. And for Algeo 2010 believed that although the British English boasts for historical prestige, currently American English has become the most important and influential dialect of the language. It influences through the films, television, popular music, the internet, and the World Wide Web, air travel, and control, cameras, scientific publications, economic and military assistance, and activities of the human states in global issues. Americans and British English have differences in word choice, like syntax, the morphology, the purism, dictionaries, pronunciation, and spelling. Most American expressions are understood and used in Britain and vice versa. While Britain prioritizes pronunciation as the mark of the social status, the Americans put greater stress on grammatical correctness, variation within national varieties, talking or writing formality, the subject of the discourse, the objectives to be achieved. Thus, we have various dialects and registers in English. The main regional dialects in America are North Mainland, South Mainland, and the Southern regions. Example of American ethnic and social dialects are Spanish influenced, Pennsylvania, Dutch, Jewish, Scandinavian, Cajun, and Scotch Irish. And for the Unit 4, Irish English, said by Algeo 2010, that affirms that Irish English is an old national variety closely related to both Britain and America. It has had an impact greater than its number of speakers or the political and economic power of the Ireland. Firstly, the British colonized Ireland, making the country of the English-speaking region. Then the Irish either migrated or were transported to America, which influenced the English spoken in now Newfoundland. The two linguistic varieties are punctuation, pronunciation, and grammar. Nigerian English. The English language in Nigeria is the second language, and activities such as the slave trade, the colonization by England along the coast road of South Africa led to implantation of the English language in Nigeria and resulted in easy importation and the use of English language along the west coast and its land, including Nigeria. Nigerian English is distinguished from American English, its phonology, grammar, lexis, collocation, idioms, discourse, and style, code mixing and code switching, a lack of homogeneity. And for the Unit 5, before we end this vlog, let me ask this question. What is a global language? The global language status, according to Crystal 2003, can be achieved when a language reaches a special role which is accepted in every country. He also claims that there are two main ways that make it possible for a language to become global. Global language. How language becomes a global language. Some people believe that easy grammar structures, familiarity in vocabulary, and the richness in culture, etc., warrant a global language, and that language can exist independently. The major influential factors making a language global is the powerful of its people. Then why English is a global language? According to Crystal again, 2003, it is either dominant or well established on the 6 continents of the world, and its main language of the books, newspapers, airports and air traffic control, international business and academic conference. For science, technology, medicine, diplomacy, sports, international competitions, pop music, and advertising. You can hear it everywhere. People using it anywhere, everywhere. So that makes the English language as a global